All right, I wanted to go over how your argument essay draft would lay out after looking at your outlines, and I thought this would be particularly helpful to kind of go over this with you. This is from another class, English 101, that did a different topic. Okay, their question was whether or not online learning should be part of a required component for education, and particularly with a focus on maybe grade school, since it is obviously part of a college experience. And should they, incorporate that more? Should they make it mandatory? So that was their question. And so this student came back, and their title is Online Learning in High School Education. Now, it's not clear from the title if they're for or against it, but we do know their topical focus. Now, they did some things well. They did some things that they made some mistakes that I want to point out as well so that you can avoid them. Blow this up just a little bit larger here. Okay, I want to take an overview with you first. They have an introduction that does what yours is supposed to do, even though you have a different topic. It's got to have some kind of information that engages us at the beginning, lets us know what the controversy is, and then it leads us to their statement, their thesis statement, which is their position. I'm just going to highlight it there. Okay. Then they're going to lay out their points with support that's parenthetically cited, called in-text parenthetical citation, which we've been introduced to before, and now we're using it, correctly. So they're going to have their topic sentences, they're going to have support, they're going to have support by more than one source. You have to have two. They're actually going to use three. Okay, and they have it in the parenthetical, and sometimes they talk about it in the sentence, which is always good because then we know what it is. Then they're going to make some more points, and they're still using one of the two sources. This time they mention Trip Gabriel, the author, in the sentence. See where my mouse is here. And it's not until now that they actually use a direct quote, and I want to point that out because we don't want we don't want a lot of quotes. We want you to tell us what these supporting articles said in your own words, okay? Using vocabulary that you know, or upgrading it a little bit with a dictionary or a thesaurus. They used a good example here. I'll come back to that. All right, right here they used what's called a block quotation. You don't have to use that, and it was only supposed to be if you have something that's more than 4 lines. We really don't want lengthy quotations. We want very selective ones. We prefer paraphrasing and summarizing. If all you did is just quote, you're copy pasting. We don't even know if you understand what it said and if it's making your point or not. But I just want to show this to you. This is a block quote, and really, with as short as our papers are, I mean, we're doing mini, M-I-N-I, mini small versions of a research paper, just to learn those basic how-tos. For a longer paper, this might be more acceptable. Really don't want long quotations in yours, but if you had to do one, it's indented, you don't have quotation marks, but it still has to be introduced, it still has to be parenthetically cited. And if you remember, the reason why they don't have Kirby here is because they put Kirby up in the sentence, and that means you don't have to repeat it in the parentheses because it's listed there. Here's their third source, and instead of an author, they have a title. But we'll see when we look at the citation, it's because an author was not given. So let's scroll down. We saw one by Gabriel, Kirby, and now this thing called Students Opting for AP Courses. So I'm going to scroll down. Close your eyes for a second if that makes you sick. Okay, here I am on page 5, and their works cited page. Now this topic did not have any chapter 14 readings that went with it, so they didn't have that requirement. I selected for your class a topic that was in our book, that there were several articles already written, trying to make that easier on you and finding things, short articles that I knew were good, and you only had to find one other, and hopefully you were able to use the one from Essay 3. Now they did take one of these and examine it for reliability, in their Essay 3 assignment like you did, but to make and prove their points, they felt like they needed more than 2 sources, that there was a point they needed to make about it being appropriate for high school, because we'll look at the thesis, that's the point they're making. They felt like high school was the right time to introduce and even require some online courses as part of their their education. We'll see why in a minute. And they weren't able to find that evidence in the Gabriel source or the Kirby source, so they had to go out and find another one. But it was also from the database. So we see that we have two from the database, Academic Search Premier, right there, and this other one here from Education Week, but they found it in the Opposing Viewpoints database. Okay, and this last one they found on the web, New York Times. Now, the error was putting the URL, and that's not a big error. That is because they have the correct MLA citation. The problem I'm getting from some students still at this point is y'all are just giving me this, web address. And that isn't even what, we don't even want that when we do have the MLA citation. It doesn't tell us who wrote it, what the name of the article was, when it was published. It doesn't give us any of that information that you were supposed to find. And it's so easy. I've given you a citation generator called easybib.com. The link and everything is in a Blackboard under Quick Guide to MLA Citation. And you can just take that web address and plug that in, and it will help you generate. It asks you a couple of questions. You may have to look at the actual article to find the answers, and it'll generate your citation. But we don't even want the URL at web address, .com address at all unless the website doesn't have a search engine. And I know for a fact that the New York Times website does have a search engine. And the problem with these little citation web addresses is that they change. And I could put that in my browser and it may not get me to that location, but if I have all this other information, I can go to the New York Times website, I can plug in this information, and it's going to take me to whatever page they have stored it. Minor thing, these should be in alphabetical order. So Gabrielle, being G before K, should have been at the top. Okay, but those are minor. You've got nice hanging indent format, it's double spaced, it's on its own page. So for the most part, it did this correctly with a few problems. All right, let's look at, I'm going all the way back up to the top. Let's take it piece by piece. That was the overview. 21st century jobs require technologically advanced skills. Now, if you're a student, you're trying to get a job, that should get your attention. Oh yeah, they do. We are in the 21st century, and technological skills are important. So the big question is, should online learning be a required component in the modern day education system? That was the question that they had to answer. They're going to go through and say, well, some people say that it could help, other people disagree, and here's some of their reasons why, and this creates a controversy. Okay, so that's how they gave the background on the controversy, because they didn't need to explain to us what online learning is. We know. So they didn't have to really explain that, and there really wasn't a problem per se. It's just they hinted at the fact that we need to do this to be prepared. So at the end, like they should, they stated what they thought should or should not be done. Therefore, because of the evidence favoring some online experiences, and because 21st century jobs require technologically advanced skills, high school level online courses should be mandatory. That's a synonym for required, because they will help prepare students for technologically demanding careers. So that is their position, and they have to support that. Okay, now so they didn't go to, they didn't go to one of these articles and just tell us everything that article said. And that's important. They had their own reasons. They had read a couple, maybe several articles, and they came up with their reasons, and then they put them in here and had support. Okay, so you're not just telling me what somebody else said, you're telling me what your position is, what your reasons are, and then evidence, facts that support that, and expert opinions. Okay, now they made a mistake with this first topic sentence by making it a question, and that is just not the strategy that we take for college papers. If you were dealing with a hostile audience where you weren't sure if they were going to listen to you, you would have to delay your thesis to the end. You might be asking questions to make them think and to actually listen. But that is not the audience we're writing for. We are writing for a college audience who is skeptical but open-minded, and we're expecting you to be straightforward and clear about your position and your reasons. Instead, they asked a question, and they needed to make their statement. Instead of saying, how is online more helpful to high school students than conventional methods of FaceTime, they needed to say that it was, that they believed online learning was more helpful to high school students than conventional methods of FaceTime instruction, and then set about in explaining why they thought that and proving it. They start with some borrowed information from the Gabrielle source. They paraphrased it, they summarized it, and according to this source, direct instruction utilized in most high schools today can be great for one-on-one time with the instructor. That would be impossible for some students, such as online learners. Well, the ending isn't very clear, but they were saying that one-on-one time would be better. Then they address the importance of FaceTime instruction and say, although it is important, online learning offers the student valuable time and experience with technologies. Now, you know this, you're an online student. You don't get that face-to-face. And they're saying, yeah, that's important, and I'm trying to compensate for that a little bit by giving you, this audio, so you can kind of, hear some instruction instead of always reading it. But it says that you get this time and valuable time and experience with technologies. And two, they're not trying to substitute all learning, take away all FaceTime instruction. They're trying to say what we need to give them this experience with technology that they need. They won't get if they only sit in a classroom and get everything face to face. So that's the point that they're making there, which is very reasonable. And then they have another one. In addition, students will not only gain much needed experience with new and useful technology, which is the point they just made, but also online courses will offer the student much more flexibility with scheduling and workloads. So they're going back to why they believe it's more helpful to high school students to have that online experience. Now, what they needed was some support. I mean, I can't just take their word for it that it would provide more flexibility with scheduling and workloads. I mean, how? They're high school students. So they needed to have an expert who said this is how it's offering them more flexibility, or, they just needed to have that, or some data, some studies done, some evidence. Then they talk about it being, a really good tool for preparing them for higher ed and a more technologically advanced society, which is back to their thesis. All right, next point. One of the main objectives of online courses is to accelerate the education of students as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Now, it's not a question, but it's not clear how this supports the thesis. I mean, what does it have to do with having mandatory education? So the weakness here is that it just doesn't have that clear connection. And if you had to sit there and think, what is that connection and how I could reword it, think about that. It doesn't just pop into your head right away. And that's an error on the part of the writer. You shouldn't force your reader to make the connections. You are the one stating the connections. You've got to write them. So here's one. The key words are accelerate, right? And quickly and efficiently. So let's take that idea and see how that supports the thesis. Well, the thesis is that it should be mandatory because it helps students for, prepare them for the future for technology. So you got to say, a benefit. Another reason why high school students should take online courses is because it accelerates their education more quickly and more efficiently than traditional. Okay, so if that's the point, they're going to have to support that, but that would be the connection. They talk about them, from Kirby says, they'll make them better students, more academically capable and highly motivated. They have a report, a study, that they say students who have some online experience in high school are more likely to attend a university following graduation, that they learn better. So there's some support that it just does a better job of educating them as a whole. This next point, I noticed I didn't have anything on here because it was fine. It's talking about why it should be high school, not, say, all grade school, kindergarten or whatever. So they're talking about implementing online courses in high school instead of middle school or elementary, because you kind of have an idea what your career path is. Maybe you're more motivated. Then they have their first quote. Notice it's been this far before we get a direct quote, and they quote the New York Times article by Trip Gabriel, and note that he's just a reporter, but this is what he reported. The advocates say that they allow these online courses, give students a chance to take some more electives and advanced placement classes that they would not get if they were just limited to the courses in high school. And that's a great advantage there. And that's options for high school students more so than grade school, elementary. They go on, you can read it. This is in Blackboard. I want to notice this one. They used an example they knew about. Hey, but you didn't see any I, me, or my here, right? Because that's not how we write formal papers. For example, automotive technology students at Lawson State learn to use computerized diagnostic programs. Now, that was a great example, especially for our audience, and it supported this point. Additionally, students preparing for technology degrees must learn specific technology skills. And so they're talking about, here, hey, first-hand experience, but they don't say I, me, or my.